Hello everyone, my name is Yoshimitsu, and welcome to the Japanese lore of Dark Souls. As the title implies, I will be referring to the original Japanese text over the translated English text. If there are any discrepancies between the versions, I will always take what the original Japanese states as fact. I take this approach as many lore elements have been lost due to translation, and I'm hoping that I can bring some answers to long debated and unanswered lore questions, and bring some new theories as well. Let's begin. Big Hat Logan is the first scholar of the Grand Archives. This is the theory that I present. To explain this theory, I will first begin with the scholars. Scholar's ring reads, a ring engraved with a portrait of a scholar increases intelligence. In Lothric, the scholar has been long considered one of the three pillars of the king's rule, and is therefore master of the Grand Archives. But the scholars were not always the masters of the Grand Archives. Blessed Weapon reads, miracle taught to Lothric knights. Blesses right weapon, increasing attack power, as well as gradually restoring hit points. The knight is one of the three pillars of Lothric, said to have strengthening ties with the High Priestess after the scholars acquired the Grand Archives. And a certain sorcery was taught by the Grand Archives to Lothric. Soulstream reads, sorcery imparted by the first of the scholars when Lothric and the Grand Archives were but young. Fires a torrential volley of souls. The first of the scholars doubted the linking of the fire, and was alleged to be a private mentor to the royal prince. Soulstream is Soru no Hondyu in Japanese. Soru is soul in Japanese. Hondyu translates to torrent or rapid stream. Now this name, Soru no Hondyu, is the same name that is used for the Soul Geyser from Dark Souls 2. Soul Geyser reads, a secret art unleashes a gush of souls. The homing soul mass pierces its target, then hits repeatedly for additional damage. This blasphemous spell is a family heirloom of Lord Aldia's. It was designed to pummel foes until its power is entirely exhausted. It's easy to make the conclusion that Aldia could be the first scholar. The Soul Geyser, that is an heirloom of Aldia, has the same name as Soulstream in Japanese. But I believe this is an intentional misdirection by FromSoft. Although the names are the same, when the two spells are compared side by side, they look nothing alike. The stats that are required for each spell is different as well. And next, Aldia is known as the Scholar of the First Sin. Scholar of the First Sin is Genzai no Tankyusha in Japanese. Genzai translates to original sin. Tankyusha translates to researcher. Aldia is the researcher of the original sin, but he is not a scholar. The scholars of the Grand Archives are also not scholars. The term scholar is kenja in Japanese. Kenja translates as wise person or sage. The scholars of the Grand Archives are sages, not scholars. And this term kenja is a term that is also used to describe Big Hat Logan. Court sorcerer hood reads, hood worn by court sorcerers of the profane capital. This tall, dark headpiece suggests they may have also been oracles. There are many sorcerers who claim heirship to the great sage Big Hat Logan, and the profane capital houses one of the two leading schools. The term Great Sage is Daikenja in Japanese. Dai translates to great or big. Kenja translates to sage. Big Hat Logan is called a Great Sage, and this is the same with the sage's big hat. Enormous hat that completely obscures the face belong to the twin gurus known as the Crystal Sages. The pair are said to be successors to the Great Sage Logan, and this big hat is a symbol of their pedigree. Great Sage here is Daikenja in Japanese, the same term used for the court sorcererhood. We have Logan, who was a sage, a Kenja, and is eventually called a great sage by the crystal sages and the court sorcerers. And the crystal sages and the court sorcerers are also the two schools that claim heirship to Logan and his magic. Logan's scroll reads, Secret tome of the profane capital court sorcerers containing sorceries of Logan. Give to a sorcerer to learn Logan's sorceries. The court sorcerers use this scroll to claim heirship to Logan's legacy, though how that claim stands up to closer scrutiny is another story. The terms closer scrutiny is sambunori in Japanese, and this term is used in Japanese to describe the logic or excuses of a thief. The Japanese description for Logan's scroll is stating that the court sorcerers of the profane capital stole Logan's scroll. The crystal sages are the ones who carried on the crystal sorceries of Logan. Crystal scroll reads, Secret crystal scroll of the Grand Archives of Lothric. Give to a sorcerer to learn crystal sorceries. These sorceries are the work of the pale drake Seath the Scaleless, whom Logan is said to have met, a branch of sorcery that has been carried on by the crystal sages. The English translation cut out the statement Keimo wo eta Logan no majutsu. Keimo translates to enlightenment. Eta translates to gained or obtained. Logan is the name Logan. Majutsu translates to sorcery. Logan gained enlightenment, and that is when he obtained the crystal sorceries. And when Logan gained enlightenment, he shed his clothing. Now, another individual who has strong ties with the Grand Archives was also able to gain enlightenment. And that individual is Ociros, the Mad King. Ociros is the former king of Lothric. The dragon scale ring reads, Ring of Ociros, former king of Lothric, reduces damage from backstabs. In his later years, Ociros became fascinated with dragons. After going mad, he was more commonly known as the Consumed King. Many assassins were dispatched to his domain, but none returned. The Consumed King ascribed his resilience to the divine protection of the dragon scale. And at some point in Lothric's history, Ociros went mad. Soul of Ociros, the Consumed King reads, Ociros went mad trying to harness his royal blood for a greater purpose, leading him to the heretics of the Grand Archives, where he discovered the twisted worship of Seath the Pale Drake. And once Ociros connected with the Grand Archives, he was able to gain enlightenment. White Dragon Breath reads, Sorcery of the deluded Consumed King Ociros emits crystal breath of Seath the Scaleless. Crystal breath has a piercing qualities. Seath's research seemed to strike a chord with old Big Hat, who, in his mad, disrobed state, made divine works, such as this, his own. Ociros was no doubt edified by this. The term edified is Keimo wo eta in Japanese. Keimo translates to enlightenment. Eta translates to obtained. Like Big Hat Logan, Ociros was also able to gain enlightenment. And throughout the entire Dark Souls universe, Big Hat Logan and Ociros are the only two who are directly stated to have gained enlightenment. Logan gained his crystal sorcery, studying the work of Seath. Ociros also gained crystal sorcery by studying the work of Logan within the Grand Archives. And these scholars, they drop crystal gems when defeated. And these gems were introduced by the crystal sages. The crystal gem reads, a gem of infused titanite introduced to Lothric by the crystal sages. And these twin crystal sages are also the teachers of these scholars. Soul of a Crystal Sage reads, the twin crystal sages once served as spiritual guides to the scholars of the Grand Archives, and one went on to ally with the Undead Legion. Now a quick note regarding these crystal sages. The term sage for crystal sage is koro in Japanese. Koro translates as elder. The twin crystal sages are the twin crystal elders. From here, I'll readdress Aldia, the scholar of the first sin. The scholars of the Grand Archive are Kenja, which are sages. Aldia is not called a scholar or a sage or Kenja. He is called a Tankyusha, a researcher, the researcher of the first sin. Now I do understand the connection with the soul stream and soul geyser, as both are called Soru no Hondyu in Japanese. But as I've stated earlier, the two spells look nothing alike. The icons look nothing alike. And the intelligence required for each one is completely different. And I do believe the spell names matching in Japanese is an intentional misdirection, as I believe it doesn't make much sense that Aldia is involved with the Grand Archives, when Aldia himself never used any crystal sorcery. And the Grand Archives has a strong connection with crystal and crystal magic. And I do not believe that the name alone of Soru no Hondyu matching in Japanese is enough to connect Aldia as the first scholar of the Grand Archives. So we have Logan, who is called a Kenja, a sage that studied the work of Seath and gained crystal sorcery. The scholars of the Grand Archives are also Kenja, sages. The twin crystal elders, the gurus of the sages of the Grand Archives, are heirs to Logan's crystal sorcery. The crystal twins call Logan a Daikenja, a great sage. And the robe that Big Hat Logan wears is called the Sage Robe, which is Kenja no Robu in Japanese. And the robes the scholars within the Grand Archives wears is also called the same thing, which is Kenja no Robu, the Sage Robe in Japanese. We also have Ociros, who connected with the heretics of the Grand Archives. Big Hat Logan's methods were considered heretical. Griggs of Vinheim, a student of Logan, states this regarding him. As he sees it, there are no gods, no transcendence, only truth, and Logan wishes to elucidate it. It is this heretical methodology that has allowed Logan to advance sorcery to the point that he has. This would directly connect the heretics of the Grand Archives, whom worshipped Seath, with Logan, who used methodology that was considered heretical. Big Hat Logan, through his heretical ways, obtained enlightenment and acquired crystal sorcery. Ociros, who connected with the heretics of the Grand Archives, also gained enlightenment and acquired crystal sorcery. The scholars of the Grand Archives use crystal sorcery and drop the crystal gems. And again, these scholars are Kenja, which are sages. And Logan is the only individual who is called a Daikenja, a great sage, and he also wears the Sage Robe. And to me, it just makes so much more sense if Logan, the only individual called a Kenja, a sage, was also the first Kenja, the first sage of the archives. And again, the scholars of the archives are actually the Kenja, the sages of the archives. Big Hat Logan is the first Kenja, the first sage, the first scholar of the Grand Archives, and is the one who imparted the sorcery, soul stream, onto the prince. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I do love reading and listening to other people's lore theories, so please do. And until we meet again in my next video, don't you dare go hollow, my friends.